People who have stayed in a relationship after their partner cheated. What was it like after? One of my best friends did this with his now ex-wife, and I helped him through the different stages until the inevitable breakup happened. After she cheated again, the trust aspect was destroyed. He was constantly paranoid, but he loved her dearly, so he didn't act on it. He just confided in me that it gave him horrible anxiety. He snuck around and checked her phone, emails, smartwatch, and such every single day. He got good at it too, doing it while she was distracted by other things. He would pop in at lunch to surprise her, which he thought was sweet, but it was really just to keep tabs. He lost a job because of this. He was convinced she was cheating and left work early one day to make sure and was fired. His life spiraled like this for 2 to 3 years. He began drinking heavily and smoking a lot. I could appease his need to vent, but nothing I said would ever convince him to just enjoy what he had while he had it. Then one day she left her Apple Watch at home and he went through it like usual and found she was having intimacy with a guy they both knew for a long time. He tried to end it all that day. Didn't work. I got him in some therapy and finally got him to divorce her. His mentality is all messed up from it in a lot of ways. And he's lost a couple of decent relationships because of the trust issues that are burned into his brain. People don't realize how much damage this can do to other people. You should have just bought a dog. Dogs are loyal and don't cheat. Plus, they're always happy to see you, like his ex-wife. Story 2. Each time chipped away at me until I literally couldn't feel anymore. I had an internal war every day of loving this woman immensely and resenting her with every ounce of my being, for ruining my freedom of loving her. I couldn't heal. I couldn't be intimate. I had to care less and less so that when it happened again, it wouldn't destroy me. It destroyed me anyway. She treated me like I had issues, like there's something wrong with me for not being able to be intimate or loving or interested in doing things anymore. And she cheated. Days after I finally saw a counselor. I had to make the break permanent, otherwise I might have stayed. She got all the support. Her family and friends vilified me for breaking up with her. She started dating someone before we even left our apartment, who she's still with and probably treating the way I should have been treated now that she had me as a lesson. And I've never been the same. Can't be close or intimate with anyone. Don't even want to be. Something broke inside. Maybe it'll come back someday, but honestly, I don't care if it doesn't. The sick part of all this is that I still miss her deeply, and I'm angry at myself for feeling that. Story 3. 3 times, same girl, and escalated. Number 1, we talked online for 2 months before I drove to meet her, college years. We went to a party. We split up and hung out with different people at the party, then I went to find her to leave and turned the corner. Bam. She was making out with a guy. Decided it was a one-off. It was the first time we met and we were both intoxicated. Trust was gone though. I never wasn't with her at a party and it caused me to be more paranoid. Number 2, I was staying in her dorm and she went to take a shower. I was supposed to message her mom on Skype if she messaged me as I was on her laptop anyways. Then a message from a guy pops up. Of course, I click and scroll up and see they had been texting before. She told me she was just appeasing him and didn't want to ruin his friendship, said she didn't get turned on and wasn't doing anything. Number 3, I got an STD. Was clean going in, looked at the timelines, all that stuff. She finally admitted to it. Still stayed, only for a month though. That was just a total mess. I would constantly be asking to see her phone, was literally unable to keep my mind from thinking about her cheating in some way. I had basically convinced myself in my own head that I was just her comfort blanket when I was there, and she was cheating when I went back home. And I was probably right, but I still wanted to be with her until I finally found an ounce of self-respect. It took me a very long time to get over the above and build up my own self-respect and confidence. The mentality of getting cheated on is not worth it. If it happens to you, leave. Story 4. She cheated and got pregnant. The family of the ex she cheated on me with denied the child was theirs. I mostly stayed for the kid because I couldn't believe they could just leave a kid like that. When it happened, I was living with him and she was visiting her ex because she already previously had a child with him and their setup was she would visit every weekend. Due to issues with her father, they ended up kicking her, and by default me, out of the house. She stayed with me and my family for a year, but she had her own issues she had to work out and it was clear she found no problems with her issues, showing zero interest in changing or growing with me. It made it difficult living with her. After a year, she couldn't take it anymore and moved back in with her family, leaving the kid with us, and I couldn't be happier. She was never in the right mindset to raise a single child, let alone two, and I couldn't be happier where my family and I are the ones raising my daughter. Finding a new partner has been challenging, and I no longer have the confidence in myself that I once had when I was in college, but being with my daughter has been extremely enjoyable, while also being enlightening. I only have one daughter. Just got used to calling her mine because, well, she is now. She's my responsibility. Also, she has my last name in her birth certificate, so she's also legally my responsibility. So no issues regarding who her rightful parents are, thankfully. Not many people in my personal life even know I have a daughter. I've only been at my current place of employment for only a year, so not many people even know I have a daughter. It's just the type of industry where people really just come and go. Plus, my relationship with my ex didn't give much room for keeping long-term personal friends, and she was pretty possessive. So yeah, I'm not used to hearing this much support about me doing what I did. For the people saying I shouldn't have to, you're right. Had I been in a different mind, I probably would have just left them to deal with the consequences and difficulties that come with being a parent, especially since it's my ex and her ex, second time being irresponsible. Might have given me a more liberated future. But I tell you, when you see that small human being for the first time, it really changes you. She might not be biologically mine, but when you feel that warmth, when you watch them grow, when you see them learn and adapt your values, I can say in full earnest that I have no regrets in choosing her over myself. Story 5. First was mid-2020. Second was just before Christmas. Third was a year or two later. Just a single day's worth of messages with an old coworker, but any guy who saw those messages knew this wasn't how friends should be messaging. Fast forward to just over 2 months ago. She finally chose to separate after we'd been fighting, and I found out she'd cheated about a year ago. She's been on Tinder for months. Been messing with a coworker for at least 6 months. Likely messed with another dude or two while we were still together, and since the separation, she's been sleeping with everyone possible, it seems. Never again. I'm a dude, if that matters. Why did I put up with it all, you ask? Had a house, 2 kids, etc. Thought we were finally in the end game of life and just enjoy it. And couldn't bring myself to rip it all apart. But with a separation 2 months ago, I'll never go back despite how much it drains me and I want her family back together. Sounds like she's been busier than a one-armed paper hanger. Story 6. A complete waste of time. I said before it happened I would never stay in a relationship after that, and it did happen. And I did try staying in it because it's always harder to have perspective in that situation. First and only time so far that it's happened. Obviously, it was never the same. And I just wasted more of my time pursuing something that didn't really exist. Forgive and forget. It's extremely hard to let go of a relationship, but once the trust is gone, it never comes back fully. And you also have to deal with the anger of the betrayal, which, again, never really goes away completely. Even if you make a lot of progress in getting over it, you still have to contend with what the relationship should have been had it never happened. Best course of action is to end the relationship and try to avoid falling into the trap of hating the cheater. You will at first, of course, but over time you can begin to recognize that the person who cheated wasn't who you thought they were. Never will be, and to try and be grateful for the good times. Sounds cliche, but I found it's true. Also, cut contact. Keeping a dialogue just delays the healing process, even if it feels more comfortable in the moment. If you have to co-parent, then you can't have zero dialogue. Best bet is to limit any discussion to strictly child-related matters. Do it primarily through text and explain that for the time being, you want to minimize in-person interactions. Agree with her that when doing pickup and drop-off, you will not be discussing anything and that any matter should be raised through text. It's hard. It depends whether or not your ex actually feels bad about what she did and if she's empathetic to the pain she's caused you. If she's a decent person, then she should be able to accept that for the time being, you want to limit interactions with her, and that in the future you have a more conversational relationship once you're feeling better about things. It's going to require a difficult conversation, though. Story 7. A lot of hard work and recovery. Trying hard to forgive him and forgive yourself for whatever shortcomings and insecurities you now think you have. Trying to figure it out if they're really remorseful or just sad they got caught. Even trying to figure out if it was just intimacy or did they care about the other person. I forgave my husband, but he did it again anyway. I then in turn had my revenge affair, and honestly, if he would have just simply given me a divorce, I wouldn't have cheated in return. I also learned that his constant accusations of me cheating was out of his fear he would get caught. So in return, he tried very hard to control me, as in where I went, who I talked to, and almost never let me go anywhere without him, using the excuse that he didn't trust me, but in truth, he was afraid someone would tell on him. It took a long time for the trust to come back, and in my case, that was a mistake. Although I do know some couples that seem to have worked through it and have a stronger relationship, I can only say I regret staying in my marriage as long as I have. And tonight is the first night of my leaving him again. And for good, this time. I'm 52. I don't want the last years of my life to be wasted worrying and fighting over the past and what could happen again in the future. Story 8. Hasn't been easy or perfect. You put so much time and effort into a relationship and it builds and builds. 2 people become 3, then 4, then 5. An efficient apartment becomes a 2-bedroom apartment, then a 3-bedroom one, then a rent house, then our own house. You put that much effort into a family. It's never black and white. It's never so easy as just cutting someone away. I was the wrong party. I didn't deserve what happened, but that doesn't mean I was a saint either. I messed up on some things too. I didn't take too well to the discovery. I messed up some more after. We both had personal lows at the time. Bad places mentally. Both of us started individual therapy. Both of us were started on wonderful meds to help with our mental issues. And both of us had some decisions to make and ugly conversations to be had. For ourselves and each other, we decided to try one more time. Not because of our kids, but because under all that hurt and sadness, we still had love for each other and didn't want things to end like that. I still don't know if it was the right decision. I don't trust her or feel about her as I once did. I still have to eat the metaphorical sandwich. But she's put in the work to get better, and so have I, and it shows. We're scared, but we're doing better. That means something. I don't know if it was the right choice, but I made this decision, and I will continue accordingly. You know, they say love conquers all. In their case, it's more like love endures. And therapy. Story 9. I cheated on my wife when I was in the army with my battalion medic whilst on ops in Iraq. When I got home, I was a broken individual. I began drinking, both because of the things that happened over there and the affair. One day I snapped and tried to end it all. In my note, I admitted to the affair and that I felt horrible for it. My wife found the note and me on her couch. After I was treated, I was remanded to psych care and got diagnosed with PTSD. My wife stayed by my side the entire time, and we even had couples therapy sessions as part of my treatment. We got past it and now have 2 wonderful kids, and it's forgotten daily, but it does come up occasionally. Also, our family were the worst about it, which I sort of got, but they have essentially cut her out after she took me back, which has been hard on her. But they weren't particularly close. Her friends are still really supportive of us and almost more like her family. It was harder work, I think, to convince them that I made a mistake. Story 10. As far as I know, she developed an emotional relationship with a guy for a couple months, and then slept with him on a random Saturday night after a party. She came home to me the next day at 3 p.m., crying, confessing everything. I believe most of what she said. I was beyond upset. I really did love this girl, and I wanted desperately to keep the life we had built over 7 years together. So I suggested staying together, and she agreed. She did everything I asked, from sharing her phone to letting me know where she is at certain points in the day, not staying out too late, etc. Didn't matter. My trust and respect was damaged. She had apparently told me everything. Her friends rolled their eyes when I say that, and did everything she could to make me feel better. But in the end, I had been too damaged and I lost my mind. Told her I didn't love her anymore after a month and that I wanted her gone. Hardest thing I've ever done. Story 11. Wife and I were high school sweethearts. From an outside perspective, we still have the perfect marriage, family, and life. From inside, I'm suffering inside every single day. 10 years of dating while we both received higher degrees and further learning. She was the most trustworthy person ever. She is beautiful, and men would hit on her, and if someone was inappropriate, she would always tell me. She never made me feel uncomfortable with any friendship before. Other than our fights as young people growing up into adults together, there was never anything that could prepare me for what happened. As our friends would be getting married and going to bachelor or bachelorette parties, the girls would call her the mother figure. I finished my studies and built a very successful business. During the first 2 years were tough. It caused some distance between us because of long hours, and my wife was in her last 3 years of training for a future job. During this time, her work or training could be over 80 hours per week, and it was very stressful. She started going out with her coworkers and employees for drinks after work. I never questioned it and sometimes met with her if I was heading back from work. I didn't like this group of friends she made. They were extremely immature, especially for the important work they did. I told her I'm not sure why you're even hanging out with them. Slowly but surely, what was always an amazing intimate life turned into a chore for her. What was 3 to 4 times a week turned into once every 10 days. What would be fun and exciting turned into, when you finish doing some chore, I'll have intimacy with you. Also, she gave me 5 minutes to finish this thing, and I'll come up and I'd wait for her over an hour, which turned into a fight. Now we're fighting every other day over trivial things, holding onto the phone and never giving it to me. At this point, I was suspicious of a potential person, but had zero evidence. I searched her phone because I didn't know what else to do and found nothing. I decided it must have just been all the stress from her training. Day of discovery. She went to bed earlier and I was downstairs in her laptop. Curiosity got to me, and I looked at her photos, which were connected to her iPhone, and then clicked on deleted images. And there in front, I saw a picture of a guy's thing. It's not mine by the obvious smaller size, and I'm sitting there a bit dumbfounded. I gathered my thoughts and head upstairs to confront her. The second I turned the laptop and showed her the picture, she jumped out of bed and said it's nothing in a huge panic. That was enough evidence to know I'm dealing with an affair. What turned into a grueling 10 to 15 days of investigating, giving her a lie detector test to her failing and spilling that she had a year-long affair with her superior employee, and having intimacy in her house while I was at work, to her having 6 additional partners which she never wore protection with, to her throwing antibiotic pills into my drink because she got infected, which I couldn't test for. She even forged her STD panel at first to hide the HPV, until she finally told me about it, friending me with a few of her partners and going on double dates with them and their girlfriends. Exactly 1 week after our 1-year wedding anniversary, she started this first affair. Once he ended it with her to be with other women, she went off the deep end and opened her legs to anyone who gave her attention. I was broken, and I to this day don't know why the hell I didn't run. I decided to fight for us. I was just broken. We went to couples therapy. We went to individual therapy. She got better and cries all the time of how disgusted she is with that person and it wasn't her. How her superior just caught her in a moment of weakness and it ruined her. She fell for him hard. I thought we were doing better, but once the dust settled and we had children a few years later, I'm still having PTSD, nightmares, constant thoughts, maybe 3 to 4 times a day. I'm capable of doing great damage and want to hurt these people badly and have deep, terrible thoughts. I'm not doing it for my kids. I've been having depressive thoughts for the last few months. I still belittle my wife now. I still remind her daily what she did to me. She fights every day to keep me sane. It's not worth it. Don't try to be strong like me and stay. 10 years of dating, 11 years of marriage, and it's so messed up. In total, she's been cheating free for 16 years or so, but it's ruined. We live a beautiful life from the outside, but so broken from within. I hope my kids never learn about their mother or somehow find out from the outside sources. I'd probably end myself. If they cheat, leave. It's not worth the pain. Story 12. I could, maybe, that's a big maybe, deal with the physical act of my partner cheating, kissing, messing around, etc., more so than the act of my partner repeatedly lying the secret life you lived. While this was going on, what lies you told me, how I believed, trusted, and had no idea you were this other person. That also depends on how many physical moments. One night can maybe be understood, overlooked, but months? Screw it. Nah. Who are you really? How close are we really? Intimately, what do we really have between us if you can be that, do that, for however long you were doing that? You know, the ongoing affair would be my issue, the hurdle to get over. I can maybe understand a one-time weak moment, one night, logically at least, in my head. As I write this, more than all of that other stuff, especially if we have a pretty good, great life going together, a family, kids, a home together, etc. I would not blow it all up for a bad night or moment. Sometimes good people really mess up, get caught up, etc. Damn, yeah, it would be a mountain to climb, to get over. Story 13. Stayed with my fiancée after catching her cheating with a coworker. It was a fairly long and involved affair. She begged me to stay together and did all the right things. Looking back, I was inexperienced and desperate. During our relationship, her affair, she withheld intimacy from me and used it as a bargaining chip. I thought that was normal. So basically, she had me wrapped around her finger. I always had trouble with women. getting rejected, etc. She was my first girlfriend, and she's very conventionally attractive, so I was obsessed. After her affair, she love-bombed me and gave me intimacy whenever I wanted, and acted like a totally different person. I fell for it all. I thought she was admitting she made a mistake and wanted me the entire time, which was wishful thinking. Took her back very quickly. Lo and behold, we find out she got pregnant during her affair. She's Ukrainian and was here for school. During this entire episode, Ukraine is of course in a war, and she turns into a refugee with nowhere to go. This adds to the entire cluster. I can't let her be alone while being pregnant, and termination wasn't an option for her. So we end up getting married, and she has a baby that I personally will always treat as my own since I made that decision. Now 7 months later, things are okay. We're in marriage counseling. I do think she has grown up a lot after being a mom, and she does truly respect that I stayed with her. But things are definitely not the same. I still resent her for the affair, and we basically don't have intimacy due to her not feeling comfortable after giving birth, which is fair. But this leads to us feeling like roommates. And I think for me, it makes me feel insecure due to her prior actions. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 14. We had been dating for about a year and a half. She got me home from a wedding on the other side of the country, and I could just tell something was up. Like this internal smoke alarm was just going off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't go through her phone, but confronted her and straight up asked, "Okay, who is he?" At that time, it was just emotional cheating, but she swore to block his number, etc. We stayed together for another 2 months, but all we did the entire time was fight. She admitted that she didn't want to work for my forgiveness, and I was so anxious and afraid of being alone that I somehow accepted that treatment. Finally, I did go through her phone and found out they had been talking again. And he also met her for a few days when she went to visit her cousins out of town. We broke up with no contact for about 6 months. My grandmother passed away and I was home on spring break, incredibly vulnerable, and somehow allowed her to come over. I would say we casually dated for about 6 more months. The entire time, she was dedicated to earn my trust again. But there's nothing like getting cheated on that will remove the rose-colored lens you look at your partner through. I saw her for who she truly is. She tried to put a wedge between me and my friends who didn't like her, tried to paint me as someone who holds malicious grudges, and finally, I just realized that it wasn't worth the stress. The relationship we had and the person I was when she cheated had been long gone. I moved on in my own way from the cheating, but it was time to cut her out of my life. She ambushed me at my house because I wasn't texting her back. I just moved 2 hours away, and I told her I didn't want to see her again. Wanted to move on to the next chapter in our lives and truly wished her the best. She reached out a few times after that, but I was steadfast in my decision. It's been about 3 years since I last saw her, and I hope she's grown and learned about herself. Don't ever want to see her again, but I do hope she's doing okay. Story 15. She told me it was my fault. I worked 12 hours, 7 days a week for her because she didn't want to get a job. I came home after a worksite accident and found her in my bed with another man. I tried to forgive and I tried to forget, but every single day going through my head was her voice telling me it was my fault because I worked too much to support her lazy and employed self. I lay awake at night having it run through my head and I can still hear it. "You drove me to it. All you do is work and you never even cared about how I feel. This is all your fault." Every night still, it runs through my head, snippets of the argument afterwards. It lasted 3 months, 3 months longer than it should have. I found out she'd stolen my card and went shopping with it. I canceled the card and said it had been stolen. I threw everything she owned onto the driveway and changed the locks while she was out getting her nails done. It was her that chose the house far out of our price range, and it was her that forced me to pick up more hours. Yet it was my fault for working that much so we wouldn't become homeless. Story 16. My husband cheated on me with 2 of my friends. One was my BFF over 25 years. I'm almost 7 years post-discovery. We're still together. I'll never be the same. Our relationship will never be the same. My love for him will never be the same. My friendships with women will never be the same. If I could turn back time, I would leave. I didn't, and the excuses I told myself to stay weren't and still aren't good enough. I love the human being I believe my husband is today, but is he really that person? I don't know. And I don't think it's worth a wait to see if he is that rare person who saw what he did and truly changed. My brain has me stuck still. After all this time, and most days I still have feelings of anger and being pathetic. This isn't how I should be living my one wild and precious life, is it? Story 17. Long, hard road. We had been married 4 years. He cheated with one of my friends. I learned he'd had a previous affair as well, which he told me because he wanted the slate clean so I could decide. I made the choice to attempt reconciliation. He and I went straight to therapy, and he willingly did anything the therapist or I asked. A year after D-Day, he ended up in a mental hospital for depressive ideation. That's where he was diagnosed with BPD. He started medication and intense therapy. He worked himself off to rebuild trust and learn better emotional coping skills. He worked to rebuild broken relationships with our children. It's been 7 years. He's a totally different person. Has fought his demons harder than I've ever seen anyone fight. He made it 80% of the way towards BPD recovery, but couldn't get over the last hump. He's currently on a 2-month leave from work doing a DBT intensive. It was really hard for a good 3 to 4 years, but it's been really good for the last several, and it's moving toward amazing. He's never had anyone stand by him, and I've never had anyone fight for me. Our kids are all high school to college age. Blended family. They're the best of friends with each other. We have outstanding relationships with them, and they all bring friends home from high school or college for life advice. It's been a hard-fought battle, but the outcome has made every painful step worth it. My caveat, we were both in it, 110%, and we had best friends who were invested in us and held us both up when it felt impossible. And we have God. We tell our kids there's almost nothing you can't rebuild from if you're willing to own your mistakes and do the very hard work of humbly rebuilding. Story 18. I found out my husband was cheating on me when I was pregnant with our first child, my second. He owned up to it once I exposed it. He spent many years honestly working to repair it. He was remorseful and offered repair, and we survived the worst days. It was 5 years of long, hard work, and then it felt a little better. For me, the damage always remained, but we had a beautiful life. Once our kids were fully grown, I started taking off all the masks I was wearing. Some were related to the affair, some were not. Over time, I've learned it's never about intimacy. It's about trust and emotional safety. I think if you can get to the point where you're emotionally safe and intimate with a spouse, it's worth staying if there's love that remains and both sides do the work. My husband ended it all this year during a time where I was exploring and trying to figure out who I am. I still don't know if I would stay or go. Story 19. I discovered that she slept around a lot. We eventually reconciled, but she immediately acted like, "You're still not over it yet?" A week after reconciling. One person that I did determine she was definitely sleeping with was married, and I messaged his wife proof on Facebook. They got divorced, and my wife was angry at me for seeking revenge. Life eventually went back to normal until our intimate life went to crap again after a few years. She was getting dolled up to a girls' night out weekly, and I was getting suspicious that she was seeking action elsewhere. I confronted her about it, and she gaslighted me about how I was paranoid and needed serious psychological help. So I decided to do some snooping while she was doing a girls' night out with the neighbors, and lo and behold, all her neighbors' friends were home, and I didn't know what I was talking about. I confronted my ex-wife, and she claimed that she lied because she just wanted time alone. Showered, dyed her hair, blow-dried her hair, makeup, high heels, and a dress for absolutely no reason. It didn't take long after to find concrete proof of who she was sleeping with. Mutual male friend. The dumb guy posted everything in a subreddit, and I saw the post. I still don't think the two of them realized that's how I found everything out. Story 20. A lot of people never ask themselves even if monogamy is a good fit for their relationship needs. You assume it's the default everyone has to live by because of societal and religious programming. I was cheated on in my first relationship and kept in the dark by him and by his friends. Everyone knew but me, and it was devastating. The lying was devastating, but so is the shattered idea of what a relationship is. 2 decades later, I've grown and have an open relationship with my partner because we communicate our needs together. And I have the self-esteem to know I can be my own person. There's more to a relationship than intimacy. It's gross to see how people in the comments are like, "Once a cheater, blah, 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 blah." You can't just broad stroke people, especially when you have to face the fact that maybe you just didn't fill someone else's needs. You take it personally. Story 21. He had a few emotional affairs. The last one was 3 to 4 years ago. I just started therapy to deal with why I was never good enough for him. Not only him, but everyone in my life since childhood. It's so hard. It has changed me as a whole person. Changed my whole outlook on relationships and love. He's trying really hard now. I just feel like I don't care. I've literally given up everything for him, and he couldn't stay faithful to me. While I was at home, catering to his every need and raising our kids, he was out acting like a single guy. Every time we role-played, I knew he was imagining her. So now when we role-play, it eats at me for days, wondering who he's imagining. I'm not the same person I was. I hate myself. I hate love. And it makes me wonder if any man out there can ever be faithful. I am to a point where I just want to be alone, but I'm too codependent to be alone. I've never had a good relationship with men, and at this point, I hate them all. I know it's not a men problem, it's a me problem. So no offense to any man out there. Story 22. I don't like conversations like this because of how Western civilization treats infidelity. First, mistakes in long-term relationships happen. That infidelity is the only one we treat as an instant, unrecoverable failure. You're either scoring 100% or 0%. Showing lack of judgment with monogamy is potentially serious. But so is lack of judgment with money, and we don't act like missing rent, day drinking once is the cue to torch the relationship and run the way we do with infidelity. Second, all infidelity is not equal. The following scenario is obviously bad. Alex is married but has reconnected with an old ex, Alice. They message each other several times a day, and sometimes Alex will tell his wife he needs to work late, but he's actually leaving work at the normal time and going over to Alice's apartment to be with her. But what about this situation? Bob's wife, Brittany, gave birth 9 months ago. She's had some pretty bad postpartum effects and has had no to speak of since her 3rd trimester. Bob is doing everything he can to be a supportive husband and father, but a year without intimacy, without a fundamental portion of their relationship, has taken its toll on him. And there's no telling when Brittany's will return. Her doctor says it could be another year. Bob realizes that this forced celibacy is not Brittany's fault, but the irrational part of his mind is starting to resent her. Bob has a business trip in the near future, so he lands up a street worker to visit him while he's in that city, far from home. He's made sure that this extramarital intimacy is happening discreetly, in a place he's unlikely to return to, with someone discreet that he has no emotional involvement with so that he can get what he needs while his wife is unable to give it, and continue being a supportive husband and father. Is that bad? Is it a better idea for Bob and Brittany to begin separation because he can't live this way anymore, and she can't meet him in the middle, temporarily? And before anyone asks, no, I haven't cheated and I haven't been cheated on. Story 23. My ex-wife cheated on me for a classmate after we went to nursing school together. I was worried that it was coming because you can essentially see them flirting like high school kids that entire year. We had our issues, but she decided to retaliate and slept with him. She even took a video and sent it to me. It was one of the most messed up things anyone has ever done to me. However, our son was around 3 to 4 that time, so I wanted to get back together for the sake of our little family. Fast forward to about a decade later, and we've been married for 11 years and together for 15 total. We have a house and 2 kids at this point. I did everything I could to make her happy, but it was never enough. She decided to go out with a guy by herself one night while she left me home with her kids. I had to go to work at midnight, and she knew this. So I sat there with my kids all night, waiting for her to come home so I could get to work. Even our teenage son told me that he thinks his mom is cheating on me. That hit me really hard when he said that because even he realized why his mom was out so long, knowing I have work that night. She came home at around 2 a.m. and took a shower the moment she walked in, so it was pretty damn obvious at this moment. We've been separated and divorced for about 2 years now, but I'm still dealing with the ramifications of her cheating on me again. The feeling of betrayal still eats me up inside, even though I have no intention of ever getting back with her now. I know not all cheaters are repeat offenders, but I wouldn't recommend getting back with a cheater. The first time hurt big time, but the second time feels a lot worse, and I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemies. Story 24. This is rare, it looks like, which is why I'm also going to share my story. The first several years afterwards were awful. There were constant doubts, hating myself for accepting them back, doubts that they were still being faithful, constant fights about trust and lack of it. It wasn't easy. I think we broke up twice because of it. They were short-lived breakups of a few days, but my anger and resentment over it got the best of me. People say time heals all, and that's BS. It dulls the wound, but doesn't heal it. It took me 5 years to realize that. What does heal it is accepting that it happened, forgiving and moving on. You cannot keep holding it over their head. You cannot be holding a grudge. It doesn't matter if it's day old or month old or a year old. If you're constantly checking their phones, forcing them to do things to regain your trust, it will never work out. Trust me, doing any of those just delays it. When you take them back, you have to let go of all that. You won't heal if you don't. You'll only grow resentful of yourself and them. Taking them back, You need to almost start completely new. After I realized that through therapy, I stopped doing all of that. You've been 9 years strong. It can work out. It's difficult, and I don't recommend it because of how hard it is, but it can. Story 25. I'm honestly wondering how many here in the comments tried intensive therapy. I'm the one that cheated. The regret and pain knowing what you did to someone you care about is brutal, and you will have to live with it. After it came out, I started therapy 2 times a week. Affairs men's group once a week and AA another night of the week. This was for the first 6 months or so. My wife says that the affair likely saved our marriage. With how poorly we communicated and how much resentment was building, we would not have made it long term. Peggy Vaughn was also an amazing resource for us. She helped us understand the underlying causes of affairs and how to move forward. One last thing. For those of you going through this, my heart goes out to you. Whether you committed the affair or whether you were cheated on, both of you have different struggles. Our therapist has repeatedly told us that Reddit has some of the worst advice on this topic. If you're struggling, please see a therapist with experience in it. Story 26. Back in college, my girlfriend cheated on me with my friend's brother. She told me it was a mistake and she was sorry. I took her back, but in the back of my mind, it felt like she had this power over me. Like I had to do anything she wanted so she wouldn't cheat on me again. You have to understand that at the time, she was the first girlfriend I ever had. And I felt so lucky that a girl was interested in me at all. Most girls never paid any attention to me before. But then several months later, I was at a party and to my surprise, a girl there started hitting on me. And before you knew it, I ended up cheating with her. My girlfriend was devastated when she found out and then started being very possessive. And before you knew it, the relationship deteriorated into this thing where we tried to outdo each other with passion to keep the other from wanting to cheat. It was probably the best intimacy of my life. But ultimately, it couldn't last because without trust, there was no real relationship. And we both knew we could never trust each other ever again. Story 27. It never changed. And every time I went back, more than once, it happened again. We learn and we grow. It takes some of us longer than others, and that's okay. The paranoia and the misery drive you slowly insane, and a real prick will use that to their advantage to gaslight you. Buzzword cringe, I know. Going out with friends from work, you wouldn't know them. Have to work late on a project, and it is bound to happen that the one time they actually are at the gym or work, you will lose your mind and go off on them. And suddenly the spotlight is off them and you're the one apologizing, graveling and putting it back together. Man, even typing this is bringing a lot back. No one else can pull you out of it. Only you can do it. Something inside you will go off like a switch without warning and you will walk away. Unpopular opinion, but I personally would never hold it against my friends if they knew dirt about my significant other. Unless we were engaged, then I would want to know 100%. I didn't want to tell me because the friendship often suffers terribly. If you're going through this, I'm sorry, OP. Plot twist, in this case, however, I originally met them 15 years ago while they were in a relationship. And I was dumb and stupid, and when you're 20, you think you know everything and are invincible, the exception to every rule. Yeah, I was that stupid. Learned such a hard lesson from it. So my stress and worry was something I caused their previous partner. Take this as a cautionary tale. The wheel of karma turns and will, deservedly, spare you no mercy. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.